Okay, cool. So as mentioned, we will be taking a look at some troubleshooting, and I'm sure if you have worked in an ops team, you would have seen some tickets coming in saying, something is not working, what have you changed? So today I want to look at some of the things that I've seen during my experience working on tickets that came into the AF-CIX. And I hope out of this you get some familiar points and also learn something new by looking at some of the basic steps we can take to prevent long extended troubleshooting. So let's look at some common network issues that we see happening in most networks. So number one is link flap. So this is something we see all the time. It's nothing new. This is when there's frequent changes in the link state showing up and down, causing instability in the network connection. The second one is link down, so meaning there's no more connection. Even though your switches are up and everything is looking fine, there is just no link to your connecting network. Then traffic drop. So this happens quite a few times where you see some dips in your traffic. So from a normal flow, you will see it might be a little drop, sometimes significant or completely down. And this is the most common issues we have encountered for the tickets that come into the AF-CIX. Now, some of the more interesting tickets that I have received, I have had a ticket that said to us, I'm running out of light. Now, I don't know if this was intended to mean that this person is just given up on everything, or were they meaning that there is no light on their devices. The second one we've gotten was, our link is down. Have you made any changes? On our side, we did not make any changes. We only swapped the router. And apparently by swapping devices, that means there has been no changes made. Now, also, we can't use our own ASN because we only have a 1 gig port. I am not sure exactly what they were trying to say with this, but we did resolve the issue at some point. Then the last one, which was quite funny, was I have swapped RxTX on my RJ45. So I'd really like to go to this person and ask them to show me how to do that, because I myself have not obtained the skill to do this in my capacity. So these things happen. Sometimes there is a miscommunication or a translation issue, but we understand what you mean. Now, when we talk about changes, I think there is a perception of what changes really mean, right? And it's important to note that any change made in a network is considered a change. What are the recent changes? So some of the things you need to consider when you see a change in your network state is, has there been any hardware updates, any new routers added, any new switches, software updates? So sometimes, especially with MikroTik, they might release a software update, and what we've seen is sometimes this messes with the configuration that has been in place without your knowledge, and oftentimes you will not even realize that the update has caused the issue. Secondly, configuration changes. So this includes if you are adding any firewalls to your network, and routing tables. Any updates to your routing tables could also cause a change in your link state. Physical environment adjustments. So has there been anything that in the environment that has caused an issue on your network? Meaning, has someone bumped a cable? Has someone been in your rack looking at your devices or touching any physical hardware? So any of those kinds of changes can make an issue on the network. So these are the basic things to start looking at when you start seeing an issue. Now let's look at some of the issues we've seen and what you can do about it. So one of the causes for packet loss due to congestion. So this is this happens quite often, where we receive tickets from networks that say, my link, I'm dropping packets. Now, this is usually caused by having too much traffic on a link. So if you have a 1 gig link and you have around 700 megs of traffic going through the link, that means you are utilizing 70% of your link. And that is when packet starts dropping. So it's important to actually upgrade your port or do some kind of load balancing between interconnects to ensure that you have sufficient capacity on your links and do not have any packet loss due to congestion. So the solution to this issue, if you see any packet drops, is monitor your traffic patterns. Do you see any, if you are looking at congestion and you see 70% utilization, do you see it on a consistent basis, or are they random spikes because there has been an update or a football match or something happening that's causing the spike? If it's irregular spikes, you might see this every now and then, but if it's on a consistent basis, it does mean that you need to start looking at alternative options by upgrading your port or installing 2 connects and doing a traffic balance. Implement a quality of service policy. So it is quite important to have a monitoring system on the traffic, especially if it's critical traffic, to let you know once you start reaching your threshold. So if you set it to 60% utilization, that is a good indication for you to start planning to upgrade or installing new interconnects to ensure that there's no disruption or packet drops in your network. And again, coming back to upgrade your port, sometimes it is just necessary to go from a 1 gig to a 10 gig or a 10 gig to 10 gigs in a lag. So this is one of the most simplest ways to ensure that you have enough capacity and you are not dropping packets. Secondly, this is also quite a often occurrence is your ASN object. So having the incorrect configured it's supposed to say ASN objects can lead to routing issues. So if you do not register your prefixes in ASN to your ASN correctly, it could lead to configuration issues. So the solution to this is verify your ASN configurations and ensure it matches your peering agreements. And use tools like PeeringDB for accurate information to exchange between networks. So ensure that all your information is updated on the relevant databases, because these databases are used by many networks to validate your peering sessions. Low speed. So this is quite an interesting one that I'm sure we are all concerned about, is you want the fastest connection possible. Now, what is the cause of low speed usually? Often due to bandwidth limitations, outdated hardware, or misconfiguration settings. So it could be a cause from many issues. Now, some of the solutions that we could recommend based on some of the troubleshooting we've done in the past is actually upgrading your bandwidth if necessary based on usage analysis. So again, coming back to ensuring that you have enough capacity on your port to have a sufficient flow of traffic. Optimize your router settings such as QoS and TCP UDP timeouts. So this actually occurs quite often, so it's important to keep an eye on those. And then check your local pref and metric prepend system. So sometimes we have seen that networks connect to an IXP but forget to set their local preference, which means they are still taking the longer route around versus going through the IX, which could be the fastest route to the network or the destination network. So it is quite important once you connect to an IX to actually review your local preference and set it accordingly to ensure that you are maximizing the benefits of connecting to the IX. Traffic routing. So incorrect routing configurations lead to inefficient paths or loops. So we've seen this happen so many times, and it's been in the news a few times, where these small changes in configuration could lead to big disaster. So some of the solutions to ensure that your traffic routing is correct and is working as it should is use route visualization tools. So it's easier for you to actually see what's happening on your network. And there are some good tools that exist that you could use to have a look at what is happening on your network. One of these examples is the DE-CIX looking glass, and most internet exchange points do have a looking glass available to you to have a look at what is happening with the routes. And adjust your BGP communities and MEDs for better route control. So it is important to keep an eye on your BGP communities and update them accordingly. What we've seen over the years is that when people connect to the IX or to a network, usually you do a one-time configuration and you leave, because if it's working and it's not broken, leave it as is. That is true in a sense, but it's also important to revisit these configurations after some time to ensure that the metrics and the configuration is still accurate and is reflecting everything that it needs to, right? Because sometimes you could be adding more networks, which means the configuration needs to be adjusted or a policy change has been implemented. So it is important to ensure that your configuration that has been set in that has been configured is still accurate. MAC address limiting. So we often receive tickets from networks that said, I'm seeing a link flap, and it's every 5 minutes. And usually when I see this, I know exactly it is MAC limits. Now, what is the cause of MAC address limiting? So some devices may limit MAC addresses per port, right? Causing connectivity issues for multiple devices connected via a single switch port. So at an exchange, usually the rule is to have one MAC address being allowed. So what we've seen is that when networks introduce a new device or a firewall to their network, the second MAC address will be pushed through to the connecting IX port, and because there is a limit set, you will see that the session gets dropped. So it's as simple as just setting the limit on the MAC address and ensuring you're only sending one to an IX. So again, the solution: check device specification for MAC address limits and consider upgrading hardware if necessary. And also check what is the policy or the guidelines from the IX in terms of how they handle MAC addresses. So usually when we talk to engineers, and I'm sure if you are an engineer yourself, you know that we like temporary solutions that become permanent, because the point is just to fix the problem and move on, right? But of course, that is not the ultimate solution. You need to really fix the problem, not just implement a temporary solution. So some of the tools that exist that you can use for troubleshooting, I'm sure most of you are familiar with some of these, but it is always good to revisit them, and hopefully there's something new today to show. So ping and traceroute is used for connectivity checks. Your NS lookup or dig for DNS resolution testing. ipconfig or ifconfig for network configuration check. netstat for network connectivity analysis. Path ping for detailed path analysis. This is quite a key one, especially when it comes to your local preference settings. Root for routing table management. PuTTY, of course, for secure remote access. Libre NMS for network monitoring. So that is quite a good open source tool that you can use to actually have a visual representation of what is happening on your network. So it actually gives you the traffic flow so that you can see what's happening, and you can set alerts, especially when it comes to your utilization of your ports. And then NL-NOG ring for network testing. So these are some of the open source tools that exist that you can use in your troubleshooting to ensure that you make it as easy as possible to narrow down on what is happening on your network. Some of the other open source tools that exist is IXP Manager. So of course this is mainly used by IXs, but because you are a member at the IX, you should have access to the looking glass that is made available via IXP Manager. FI routing does exist. IRR Explorer is actually a very good tool to see if your ASN object is up to date and has all the relevant information associated to it. So I do recommend having this tool to see what is happening with your ASN object and also checking up on other networks that you are connecting to. PeeringDB, I'm sure most of us are aware, PeeringDB is a database where you can find more information about the networks that are peering or co-locating in some of the data centers. This tool actually gets used by many of the big CDNs and networks that you want to connect to. They have built it into their automation system that when you send a peering request, they actually query PeeringDB to ensure that the information on PeeringDB is accurate and it does exist. If your PeeringDB database is not updated or does not exist, you might get declined for a peering session with someone that has a selective peering policy. So PeeringDB is free to use, so we do recommend having a profile and putting all your information. It's also a good tool to use if you are doing some troubleshooting and need to speak to the technical team on the other side. LibreNMS, as we mentioned, this is a good visualization tool if you want to see what's happening on your traffic on your network. Netbox Labs is actually a good way to have a representation of what's happening in your cabinet, and there's many more features that is actually very cool to have for your network deployment and planning. And then of course Peering Manager, if you need any assistance on peering or some information on peering, Peering Manager is a very cool tool to use, and again it's open source, so it's freely accessible. Some of the other assistances that exist is the RIPE NCC Tracemon. So Tracemon is a web application for visualizing your network topology, and it's generated by trace routes reaching one of more targets in a network. So this is a way to see what does your network topology look like if you need a visual representation thereof. You have rich trace route. It enriches your trace routes with origin, ASNs, and internet exchange info. So it actually shows you what is in between the networks. So you can actually see who is in between your networks. Peer Finder, a tool to find common points between ASNs on PeeringDB. So this is actually quite a nice tool if you are looking to find where you can peer with a specific network. This tool allows you to see that if I am in, I don't know, a digital realty data center, if the destination network is also peering there, or if you are wanting to go to someone like Meta and you want to see where you can reach them, this tool actually helps to identify the locations that you are both active in. Then a route server, a tool to automatically build and feature reach configurations for BGP route servers. So this is just your configuration buddy, I would say. So it's a great tool to use if you need some guidance on your configurations. Then getting to some best practices, and I think this is things we know but we don't really want to do. So clearly define the issue. What is happening and what are the symptoms? We've often received tickets where it says, my network is down. Okay, that's nice. Where? What? Why? Who are you? What link are you talking about? So it's important to have as much information as you can. So your ASN, IP configs, if you have any references, or even if you can provide trace routes to actually indicate what is happening on your network and what you are seeing. This just helps the troubleshooting process speed up. Collect information, gather details about the problem, including when it started, what actions led to it, and any error messages. So it's important to identify when this started. So even though the link is down, when did it start? Did it just go down? Did you do any changes, or was there any modifications made, or what has happened before this leading up to the issue? And then isolate the problem. Determine if the issue is isolated to a specific device, application, or user. So it's important to take I wouldn't say the fundamental steps to see what is actually causing the problems. Is it a link? Is it a device? Is it an application? Is it a port, an optical transceiver? What is actually causing the problem? Because if you just say my link is down, it could be any of those that could be the issue. So we want to ensure that we troubleshoot the problem and resolve it as fast as we can, right? So, additional tips, use a systematic approach. So I've seen this many times where people run like headless chickens if the network goes down. And I do understand because it's critical, right? The network needs to work. But once you start running around, you start running in circles, right? So it's important to have a step-by-step kind of guide and in your mind know what we need to look at, right? Because also working in a team means that we need to know who is doing what and where we are in the process. Communicate effectively. So if you are troubleshooting, it is important to let your team know, and as well as the network you are working with, to let them know what you've done, what steps you've taken, and what you are seeing as you are doing your troubleshooting in your network, so that we all know what is happening. Because if one engineer changes something without the other knowing, you're just going to go into circles. Be patient and persistent. So this is something I can take as advice for myself, because sometimes I get very frustrated because we need to fix it now. So it's important to remain calm, because when you are panicked, you can make mistakes. And it's sometimes simple mistakes, or you can have memory loss of what you actually did to get to the resolution. Use tools and resources. So we've given some examples of tools that you can use, but it's always important, especially at these conferences, to talk to other networks to understand what they are doing to resolve issues in their network. There could be more tools or new tools that are developed that you can use and are easy to access. Stay updated. Again, just keep your team updated as well as the network you are working with on what is happening, and also keep up to date with what's happening in the interconnection and peering space. If there's any trends or issues being picked up in the industry, be aware of what's happening and be proactive to see how you can secure your network and ensure that you do not have the same issues. And then create troubleshooting guides. So I think this is something that not many companies have in place, is troubleshooting guides. So many of us sit with this process in our minds of knowing exactly, after so many years of being a network engineer and doing troubleshooting, it automatically comes to you on how to resolve the problem. However, if you have new team members or the team starts expanding, not everyone is on the same level. So it's good to have a troubleshooting guide in place to ensure that if there is a problem, the people are aware of what steps to take and what to look for, and to know how to respond to these different kinds of scenarios. So it's so important to have a guide in place and be sure that your team is familiar with this. So now that I've given this talk and have pointed out that sometimes it is just something small within the network that could happen, I hope that you realize that when you send an email to a network and you say, what have you changed? I hope you reflect and actually see that, okay, maybe sometimes it's me that is the problem. So that's it. Thank you so much.